And we defined real wealth as having the time and the money to live life the way you want. So a lot of times people have the time but no money, or they have the money but no time. So we help people be able to do both, and we achieve that through passive income.
Welcome. This is the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. This is where you'll learn strategies to help you achieve lifetime financial freedom through real estate investment. Your host, Rod Khleif, has owned over 2,000 homes and apartments, and he brings experts in all aspects of real estate investment and management onto the show. Now, here's your host, Rod Khleif.
Welcome to Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm thrilled you're here. Before we get to our incredible guest today, I want to mention a couple of quick things. And the first, most important being, if you like what you hear, press the subscribe button on iTunes. I don't want you to ever miss another show. I also want to let you know that I really want to hear what you think, and happy to set up and allow you to set up 30-minute phone calls with me. They're free. I don't have an agenda. We can talk about anything you want. I love talking to you guys, and I'll help you in any way that I can. And you know I don't sell anything on this podcast and I don't on these phone calls. There's nothing going on. I just want to help you in any way that I can. But I only have time for 2 or 3 of these calls a week, and you can schedule them directly on my calendar, which is on lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. So that's it. Let's get this show on the road. I know you're going to love the incredible woman we're interviewing today. She's a regular guest on Fox News, CNN, CNBC, Bloomberg, every acronym you can think of, NPR, CBS, on and on. The last 2 years in a row, she was named in the top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs by Goldman Sachs. Her name is Kathy Fettke. She's also a very successful real estate investor. She owns a 92-unit apartment building we're going to talk about, and lots of other commercial real estate. She's done a lot of real estate development. But she's also the CEO and founder of the Real Wealth Network. It's realwealthnetwork.com. And they're an online resource for real estate investors, and they're a great online resource for real estate investors. And they've got over 23,000 members, so you really need to check that out. She's also got I think 1 or maybe 2 podcasts that about real wealth and building real wealth. So, Kathy, I'll have you go back to the podcast answer because I can't remember if it's 1 or 2. But thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So is it 2 It's 2 podcasts,
it's 2,
right?
Yeah. I interviewed you on the Real Wealth Show, and that's kind of more long interviews from successful investors. And then Real Estate News is a daily show that helps anyone in the real estate industry just to stay on top of this ever-changing market and the market cycles and economics.
Right. So why don't you, you've got an incredible background and very impressive background, but why don't you expand on the intro a little bit and tell us a little bit more about your real estate story? Well,
my story, it's funny, we were talking about apartments and that's your focus. Apartments are actually what got me into this business, just totally by accident. My dad was a dentist, and he had invested in apartments in Marin, California, in San Rafael, actually. And because he was a dentist, like many professionals who are too busy to pay attention to their investments, he never really checked it out, and it was part of a syndication. And over time, the managers did not take care of this property. I'm
sorry, but let me stop you for a minute. I missed something. So he had a property. Mm-hmm. I missed that. Yeah, so he had a property, but he didn't take care of it.
Well, he was invested with a group. It was like a limited partnership or syndication of some kind, and he'd been depreciating it. A lot of dentists and doctors buy these. Get into these group syndications. It's a great way to raise money, right? If you're trying to buy apartments. Right. Sure. Because they need the tax deductions. But what he didn't do is pay any attention to the management of it. And the managers turned out to just neglect the property. So he, after years of depreciating it and taking all these tax benefits, he gets a letter in the mail from the managers saying that they sold it. But they didn't warn him. And so he had to do a 1031 exchange after the close has already happened. And it's just terrible. And he had 2 weeks left, or he was going to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes that he had written off on this property.
Sure.
Oh, and so
that's called a fire drill. Yeah, that's called a fire drill. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I had just gotten married. We had nothing to do with real estate. We were renting. But my dad and mom called me in so much stress because they had just retired and they did not have a few $100,000 to just pay Uncle Sam. That wasn't part of their plan.
Sure.
And so, he told me, he said, we have to find a replacement property in 2 weeks. And I just said, well, that doesn't sound hard. So I found him the replacement property. It was a 4,000 square foot 6-bedroom home that I turned into a fourplex, and we rented part of it and we rented out the rest. And that was kind of my entree into real estate. It saved my dad from having to pay those back taxes. And when he passed away, we inherited that property. And of course, it stepped up to market value and those taxes never had to be paid.
Wow. Let me just for my listeners that don't know what a 1031 tax deferred exchange is, I'll just give you a real quick thumbnail. Basically, you're allowed to utilize this exchange process to defer your tax gain from a property to a like kind property. And it sounds, when you think exchange, you're thinking, okay, well, I've got to pick something that somebody else wants of mine, and it's not like that. But there are strict guidelines for how quickly you identify that property, and then there are guidelines for how quickly you close. And typically you have a lot more than a couple of weeks to plan for something like this, so I can't imagine the fire drill. But I've done 1031 exchanges a lifetime ago with houses, and it's a great way to defer taxes. And like you just said, you inherited this property, and literally the tax is still, it's still in a deferred status. Or actually, was it wiped out?
It's wiped out.
It's wiped out. Wow, that's fantastic.
It's unbelievable. It steps up to market value, and there's no gain, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better than that.
I know.
Wow. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but so you got that property.
Mm-hmm.
And can you what'd you do? What have you done? How did you start out? Besides that deal, what else? What was next?
Yeah. So that's when we found out how easy it was to be a landlord. Of course, these were people that we would choose because they were living with us and in this fourplex, and a lot of times it was friends, but we understood all of a sudden the value of passive income and how we could live in this beautiful house in the best school district, and actually be paying less than rent because we were renting out all these, corners of the house, basically.
Right.
And then, but my husband was an inspirational, motivational speaker. He has a book called Extreme Success. He was on a book tour. They were calling him the next Tony Robbins. He was at the peak of his success.
I didn't know that. No.
And he came home one day and tears in his eyes because he'd gone to the doctor to check out a freckle. Turns out it was melanoma. After many tests, they had belief to think that it had spread to his liver, and the doctor just said, in these cases, you've probably got about 6 months to live.
Wow.
Yeah, and so here we were with this house that, thank goodness we had this situation where we could rent out these rooms and kind of carry us through this difficult time. In fact, we did this, oh my gosh, it was crazy. We did this international student program where students would pay $600 a month and you could put 4 in a room. And we
wow.
did that.
Good for you. Good for you. Hey guys, there's a tip for when you really want to maximize your cash flow.
It was crazy. And so dinners were full of foreigners from all over the world, and our kids grew up in that environment, but it got us through that difficult time.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
It was 2003, yeah.
And he's still around.
Oh, thank you.
Obviously, yeah, okay. Well, that's good news.
He's doing great. Yeah, he's great. So, but, sometimes the darkest of times are what catapult us into what we're really supposed to be doing,
No question.
Yeah.
I can tell you stories myself, but please continue.
Yeah. And so here we were in this terribly dark time, and of course, I wanted him to live his 6 months, so I needed to take over the finances, but we had 2 young children. So at the time, I had a regular radio show. I'd been in broadcasting all my life, but I was a stay-at-home mom. But I still had this radio show that I just liked doing and didn't make any money at. But I thought, okay, I got to make money at this now.
Right.
Yeah, so I thought, well, how do you do that? Well, I could sell sponsorships, or I just didn't really know anything about money at the time. I just, like I said, had been in broadcasting following my dream, but it was never really it wasn't in the financial industry, that's for sure. So I just started calling people who might sponsor. And at the time, think about this, 2003, who were the people with the money? It was mortgage brokers, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, they were swimming in it. If you could fog a mirror, you could borrow money on a house back then.
Yeah. So I ended up, I called a lot of mortgage brokers and heard a lot of no, I'm not interested. But finally I thought, how can I really just present something they cannot say no to? This is another tip. My next pitch, I don't want to hear no, I want to hear yes. And I want it to be so fabulous no one could possibly say no. So I said, all right, instead of saying, do you want to sponsor my show? How about, would you like to be a co-star on my show, a co-host?
Wow.
Yeah. And here's the cost. And it was an enormous price tag. And the next person I called said yes. Wow. Yeah. And that's how I got in. And turns out just by luck or fate that this mortgage broker wasn't any normal mortgage broker. He was a real estate investor and a very experienced one. And so when I came home to my husband laughing, saying, oh, honey, you're not going to believe I just sold my soul. I'm doing a show on mortgages. I don't know how to make it interesting. And he said, just take the human interest side. Find out what people are doing with mortgages. And if they're real estate investors, they're probably doing some cool things. So that's what we did. We just interviewed all these people who had gotten loans and, how we're retired now or, we're creating all this passive income or flipping or whatever they were doing, just cool stories. And
investors.
Mm-hmm, yeah, investors.
Okay.
Sometimes people would buy a primary like we did and rent out rooms or subdivide, but whatever it was, they had to be building wealth. That's why it was called The Real Wealth Show. And my husband, of course, at the time said, hey, I heard about this thing on iTunes. They have this thing called a podcast. So we were one of the first, he took that show and made it a podcast, The Real Wealth Show.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And look at you now. Wow. You're in the top 5 almost all the time. Well, let's talk about let's talk about some of the multifamily deals you've done since then.
Mm-hmm, sure.
What, I know you've got that, was it 92 unit building?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that one? I know, that's not the horror story.
I want to tell you everything that can go wrong. How's that?
All right, good. All right, let's do it.
All right. So, I have always, my whole business has always been built on aligning myself with people who have done what I want to do and have a track record, and can help me, because I didn't want to jump into an apartment building having never owned one, right? Not a 92 unit.
No, right. Mm-hmm. That's what I tell my listeners all the time. Find a sponsor, find somebody that's done it, find a mentor. Yeah. So anyway, you have the same mindset.
Yeah, so this person came to our group and had this unit in Anderson, Indiana, but unfortunately what happened is there was a gas leak. And so the city forced everyone to move out.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'll impact your cash flow.
Yeah.
Wow. So this was after you'd taken it down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was kind of in the, yeah. So, wow. And then in being vacant, it was vandalized. And even though we had, of course, the boards up on the windows, that never helps because that just tells people it's vacant, right?
Wow. So backing up just a hair. So how'd you find the deal? Let's start there.
Well, this person brought it to us and it was great. Okay. And obviously I wasn't in a position to be able to analyze it because I didn't have the experience. I mostly had experience in 1 to 4 units basically. So a building this big, I studied it, but studying and doing it are two very different things, right?
That's absolutely correct. And so you relied on your partner in this deal. Mm-hmm. And did you have to take debt to do the deal?
Here's the thing. I raised money through investors. That's one of my strengths.
Well, let me tell you, that probably saved your bacon if that's the case, because then, that's not like a bank foreclosing. You just have to let your investors know what happened and let them see light at the end of the tunnel. So you got a gas leak and the city made everybody move out. Yeah. It wasn't the kind of leak you could fix quickly. It was like pervasive through the whole building.
Maybe, but they made everybody move for safety reasons.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Holy cow. What a nightmare for them as well. How occupied was it when you first bought it? Wow. Holy cow. Jeez. I don't even know. So what else happened?
So then, we did have...
Got vandalized. Got vandalized, right?
Yeah, it was vandalized. And
You didn't have a manager in place? You didn't have somebody keeping an eye on it, or?
We did, but it was, we were reconstructing it, fixing the pipes, and
right.
It kind of, I hate to say this, but it almost felt like an inside job because they knew where everything was.
Wow.
Yeah. So
probably was. I mean, probably was. Probably could have been one of the pissed off tenants that you threw out.
Could have been that. Could have been one of the workers. No. I mean.
Wow. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
But here's the way it's going. So we did have a bank loan. It was the investor money I raised was for the equity, but we had a loan, and the loan was $1.2 million, and by the time we got what we needed and the permits to get back in and get it rented, that loan grew to about 1.8. And, the numbers just weren't going to work anymore. So I went to the investors and said, look, we can just walk away from this thing. And, I'm not going to let you lose money. We're going to just go do something else that's going to be easier. And, or we just stick it out. And they were like, do what you think is right. So I just called the bank and I said, you know what? You can have it. You can.
Oh, wow. So you bluffed.
I didn't bluff. I was done.
Oh, no? You were ready to walk. Wow.
I was like, it's yours, man. Take it.
But let me, I don't understand a piece. You said, we'll go do something else, but all those investors would have lost their down payment.
They would have lost their equity, and they would have had to file losses on their tax returns, which a lot of people needed.
Yeah, that's a hell of a way to have a loss, though.
Yeah, but I wasn't going to let them lose. I was going to find them a deal where they'd earn it back.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm. That's what you sold them on, the fact that you'd make it up in another deal. Okay, I got you. Okay, so you went to the lender and said, "Here you go. Here's the keys." And what happened?
I just said, you can have it. And about I don't know, a few weeks later, when I let the investors know, I got a call from the bank, and they lowered they made an offer for me to lower that $1 million. So. It went from more than that, because it went down to $700,000.
Wow.
So that's how we were able to save it. And now it's in the process of being leased, and we have a few more units to finish. But, in that process, because the person who brought it to me, who had 50% ownership, I went to him and said, look, you brought us this deal. It ended up being a lemon. I've got investors that matter to me a lot, and you need to just give up your shares. He did. And
did he have money in it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He did.
Yeah, but
wow.
I said in exchange for walking away, and the investors won't sue you, give them the full interest. So between the $1 million write down of the loan and the investors getting 100% ownership, they're going to come out ahead of what they thought they would. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's turning a lemon into lemonade. And so where are you at now? You're already leasing, and you've started the leasing process. So at least the gas leak is handled, and now you're just doing renovations, because obviously, all those people moved out. Every one of those units has to be gone through and made ready. Exactly. So you're in that process.
Yeah. And bringing in, the typical things. Well, some of the things that you told me to do, one thing when you have a vacant building is have your first tenants be a couple of cops, and then you got cop cars there at the facility at night.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that's great. Is this, what's the area? Is it a C area, B area, D area?
Nice neighborhood. It's actually oddly in a very residential neighborhood near a Christian university.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of university kids that we're going after. And if this happens, now this is one of those things that could be just miraculous, but the city of Anderson has been playing with the idea of putting in a reservoir in the middle of town where there's just kind of nothing going on, and because the water would go to Indianapolis. And if that happens, now this is a big if, and it would probably take 10 years, our property would be lakefront.
Wow. Now that would really be, that'd be a lemonade slushie instead of just lemonade. Wow. Holy cow. That's awesome. Well, let's hope that happens. Let's hope you're still in there and your investors decide to stay. Is the plan to stabilize it, refinance your investors their capital back, and then just hang on to it? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the home run strategy right there. Mm-hmm. So, now, I know you've done lots of syndications, and I know you do lots of development work, but I think you were mentioning to me before we started recording that you actually are looking at another property right now. Is there more to talk about on the 92 unit, or will you cover it?
No, hey, listen, I want to be on your show next time saying it's fully leased and we've refied. Everybody got their money back.
Oh, I know that'll happen. If it was fully occupied when this hiccup happened, it'll be fully occupied again, and it'll be in better shape. And it sounds like you'll be in a much better financial position in the property for your investors to really capitalize. So I think it's going to be a home run. But let's talk about the new deal.
Yeah, so I can't give you too much because we're literally I have a call right after this with my partner on that, who we've done a lot of development with. But basically, Reno is booming. It is. Okay. It's got the Tesla factory there, and
oh yeah, that's right, the big battery thing. Okay, yeah, right. Okay,
which is the size of like 10 football fields or something. I mean, it's
no, I've seen it. It's staggering. I mean, I know when he tried to make that happen, and I read some articles in Forbes about it, but I guess it's just enormous.
And there's no housing, so it's just a very mountainous place. It's near Tahoe. It's hard to find buildable land, and so we found, and let's face it. If I don't know if you've been to Reno, but it ain't Las Vegas.
I've been to Reno, and I've never been back.
Right. I mean, it's a pit, but
right.
But it's really redeveloping. I mean, the city. What's happening there is there's a local university that maybe they went there to learn how to be strippers and gamblers. I don't know. But now, because Tesla got all these tax write-offs, massive tax write-offs. That's how Nevada was able to attract them.
No, I know. I read that. I mean, they gave him the moon. I mean, they all these different states were vying for that factory. But anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Well, and San Antonio was almost signing. I mean, I think San Antonio was signing the deal when Reno said, "We got a private jet waiting for you before you sign that. Come here." And when the officials at Tesla arrived in Reno, the Reno officials gave them permits.
Wow.
Like you can build today.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Well, that's awesome. So obviously there's an incredible housing opportunity.
Well, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, they need, part of the deal was they had to hire Nevada people, and Nevada people aren't exactly trained to do like high tech battery stuff. So they took the university there, and they are now making it one of the top universities in this cutting edge technology. So it's totally revitalizing, but you can still find really dumpy motels and gross buildings. And so this is just an old, ugly apartment that we're going to, renovate and lease out to this huge demand for housing.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So let me ask, okay, well then we'll leave that alone, since you're still working it, but let's talk about, team. Tell me the kinds of people you align yourselves with to put these deals together. Yeah. What sorts of people are on your team?
Well, I can tell you every time I've done something wrong or things haven't gone as expected, it was because that person didn't have enough time, enough experience. I think there's a fabulous book, and I think it might be Outliers or something like that, but it's basically that you can officially call yourself an expert when you've had 10,000 hours.
10,000 hours. Yep. It is Outliers.
Is it Outliers?
Okay. Book. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I align with people who have 10,000 hours. I mean, it's really that simple.
Okay, so you find people that have done it a long time, that really know it, that have lived it. Okay, and so when you were first getting started, how did you fund your deals? I mean, have you always done syndications? Had done it with partners?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So when I started, funny, it's tying back to the story I told when we bought that house that my dad, that I found for my dad that I inherited. And by the way, we paid him back everything. I mean, it was just such a win-win. And so, that house we bought in 97, we didn't know anything about real estate or market timing. Well, 97 was the bottom in the California market. So we bought at the bottom. By 10 years later, that house made $1 million.
Wow.
We bought it for $500. It appraised for 1.8. Wow. It was crazy. And then, of course, a year later, it was back down to 800. I mean, it's California. Right. But because I had just done this radio show and I was doing mortgages, and that, we had so many people blowing up our line saying, I want a mortgage, that I ended up getting my license and becoming a mortgage broker, and then became an expert in that. And that kind of led to more things. So all I really knew in the beginning was borrowing conventionally. So we just borrowed against this house that just ended up being this amazing blessing. Borrowed against that and bought property, borrowed against that and bought property. And then I met a guy who said, you're going to run out of money. And that is the day you're going to find out that you're a real investor, because you're going to have to figure out how to get more money.
Sure.
Yeah. And so it was like, okay, I've maxed out my conventional abilities. And I think, again, it was all kind of by accident. I didn't plan it at all. I'd gone to seminars talking to people who get private money or work with investors, but it just had never, I don't know, it didn't occur to me because I'd been in this conventional mortgage financing world. And then somebody brought me this deal that sounded just so amazing. And so I thought, I'm just going to talk about it a little bit on my show, and I'm just going to mention it, send out one email. And I was like, I needed to raise $3 million. I raised it like in less than 24 hours. Like we had.
No kidding. See, I was gonna ask you if you had like an elevator pitch. I'd love to hear your elevator pitch, but it sounds to me like all you had to do was put it out there on your radio show, and boom, you had a lot of people that were interested. Well, let's back up. Do you have an elevator pitch? I mean, do you when you're like meet somebody and they say, what do you do? And and you can tell they could have the wherewithal to be an investor. Do you have a stock pitch?
Kind of. Our company's Real Wealth Network, and we defined real wealth as having the time and the money to live life the way you want. So a lot of times people have the time but no money, or they have the money but no time. So we help people be able to do both, and we achieve that through passive income.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. So what words of wisdom would you give an aspiring commercial real estate investor?
Well, first of all, listen to you. You have a great show.
Okay. Thank you. That's very sweet. And I will back at you. Your show's also awesome.
Thank you. But I couldn't be more serious. There are a lot of frauds in this business. I can't even tell you how many I've met. They are everywhere, and they are sometimes the most handsome or beautiful people with the nicest smiles and the warmest handshakes, and they will rip you off. They will lie to your face. I don't know if you've experienced that.
It's been a while. My intuition has really been honed. A lot of people don't know I've spent a lot of time with Tony Robbins, 16 years, and I'm on I help at his events regularly, and that experience has honed my intuition. So I can kind of smell, fraud, in somebody, but no, it's disappointing to hear that there's a lot of people out there doing that.
Oh yeah, I mean, and maybe I don't know. It's constant, and I see people losing money trusting it. So just because someone spoke at your real estate investment group and has a boot camp, it doesn't mean that you should invest with them. You need evidence and proof. You need to see that they really legitimately own property. And I don't know how far you go. I mean, I don't know what you would suggest, like show me the title documents. I don't know, but I've seen it too often. I've seen people get ripped off over and over again, because most of us don't expect people to just be able to look you in the eyes and lie to you. But I'm telling you, it happens.
No kidding. Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I would tell people listening, if you're getting into that sort of a situation, do your homework. Trust, but verify. And you verify by asking them where the property is. You can look up any property in this country online and see who owns it, through various different resources, and do your homework on the person, right? I mean, what would you suggest? I mean,
background check for sure.
Background check. There you go. I mean, see what they're made of. See, what their history is. I couldn't agree more. So okay,
but and then I mean, so then if you find someone who really, like someone like you, who really, really, really has done this for a long time, and maybe someone could look up either of us and say, well, you guys, had some tough times. Well, yeah, and that's what makes us good, right?
Well, thank you. I haven't really talked about my war stories on this show so much, but yes, have I had tough times? Oh, hell yes. Yeah. And we all have. I mean, anybody that's a success, self-made success, has got wins and they've got losses. And mine are probably a little more spectacular than others, but on both sides. But no, you're right, and that's what molds you. I mean, that's what makes you. And you know what? I'm going to go right into that because well, go ahead if you have another thought. But I want to bring something else up.
Well, that was what I was going to say. Is if you're thinking about partnering with someone, ask them. What? Tell me about some lessons learned. Because if they are truly as experienced as they're saying, they're going to have some war stories, but they're going to have some great success stories too. Right.
Well, that's that. I was going to ask you that, and we can go right into that. I have something else, so I want to ask you first. I do want to ask you a war story and a victory story, but that's after this next question. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know that I do some really powerful 5-minute segments called Your Driving Force Success Tip, and sometimes I mix it up with a real estate tip. But we talk about goal setting, visualization, motivation. How to find that drive, that your why. The reason you do things. And I always like to ask my guests, if I have time, where you get your drive. And you are such a dynamic force for good. What makes you jump out of bed in the morning to conquer the world?
Oh, that's such a great question. I don't know why or how or what molded me, but I've just never allowed myself to be unhappy. And, or a slave or to do, I won't do anything I don't want to do. And so maybe I'm the youngest child. I'm the 5th kid. I'm spoiled, whatever it is. I see too often that people do choose unhappiness. They stay in these jobs they don't like. And, it's like, so I got up in the morning with just this beautiful life with this fabulous husband and wonderful children. And I feel like I'm just living my dreams, and I want others to know that feeling. So that's what drives me.
Okay, well, that's a great answer. All right, well, let's get right into it. Share a war story. I mean, unless it's the one you just talked about. Is that the war story?
That is
or do you have
definitely the war story.
That's the war story. All right, well, let's talk about a victory story then. I know you've talked about a couple of those already. That house your mom and dad left you. That was great. Do you have another one, another home run?
Yeah.
You want to talk about?
Yeah, in the multifamily, this is just a duplex, but we bought a duplex in Pittsburgh across from where there's a lot of new building going on. We paid like $55,000 for it, and it rents for $550 on each side. So it's just, that's just kind of a fun little thing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, if you can rent it for 2% of what you paid for it a month, which you just described, that's a perfect. I mean, that was my back of the napkin scenario, kind of framework for when I was buying houses in Denver. When I first started, I bought 500 houses in Denver before I moved on, and that if I could rent it for 2% of what I paid for it, so in other words, if I paid $20,000, if I could rent it for $400, I knew it would be a home run. Mm. And you just described that exact formula with your $55,000 and $550 a month on two sides times 2. So that was the same formula. If you could go back with your successes, if you could go back and tell your younger self a little bit of advice about this business with the knowledge that you have now, what would you tell yourself?
I would have started much younger.
Good answer. Great answer.
Yeah, I started at 31 or so, and would have definitely started younger. And I look at my daughters. I've got a 23-year-old, and I'm just like shaking her, like, come on.
Oh, I know. I've got a 21-year-old son. He was just in here right before we started talking, and I'm trying to get him to listen to some tapes and get going. Yeah. And it's he wants to, but it is at that age. But that is a great answer. And for those of you listening, go read the Nike logo. If you're on the fence, just go do it. Go do it. Yeah. Just do it. So, all right. We're getting near the end of the show. I occasionally I'll ask this question, and someone as knowledgeable as you, I'd really like to get the answer. What's a great book that you love either about this business or about life in general?
I think that The Science of Getting Rich changed me.
Oh, that they had like a tape set or something, didn't they? Wasn't that Bob Proctor's thing?
No,
I've got that.
No, I think it's someone else, and I can't think of the name, but The Science of Getting Rich. And for me, what I've discovered is that you will not attract wealth if you have any negative feelings about it. If you think that being wealthy is going to have people not like you or like you just for your money or is selfish or whatever, is ungodly, anything like that is going to have you not attracted. I mean, why would you?
Right.
So the science of getting rich unlocked that for me. And I can't tell you why, but it just that book was powerful for me. And it showed me that I could do great things with lots of money.
Wow. Love it. And I completely agree. I mean, it's no question what you focus on, you get, like The Secret, like the law of attraction. If you don't believe you can become wealthy, you won't become wealthy. Mm-hmm. And you have to believe it. Well, listen, Kathy, it's been awesome. I really appreciate you taking your time to be on the show. And, I hope we can stay in touch and follow each other's careers.
Yeah, likewise.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please subscribe and then take a moment to visit iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and review. For more resources to connect with us further, please visit our website at lifetimecashflowpodcast.com. Tune in next week for our next show.